Welcome to the debate.
Today, we're digging into something pretty fundamental. It's the mechanics of success, really. The relationship between our internal world, our thoughts, our attitudes, and what we actually experience externally, our prosperity.
Exactly. And the central question we're going to be tackling is this. To what extent does that inner mental world, your mindset, actually function as the primary, and I want to stress that word, primary determinant factor in shaping your external reality? I'll be making the case that the inner world is, for all intents and purposes, the control center, the source code, and that everything we see on the outside is basically just a reflection, a mirror of that internal programming.
And I'm going to challenge that strictly deterministic view. I absolutely acknowledge that internal focus is crucial. It's a necessary condition for sure. But I'll argue that, structural forces, systemic issues, and just plain old circumstances play a very real, independent, and sometimes overriding role in our outcomes.
All right, so let's lay out the positions.
Let's do it.
My position is that this thesis it's profound because it grants you ultimate self-sovereignty. Everything that shows up in your outer life begins in that quiet inner space of thought. What lands on your doorstep is quite simply a mirror of what's already brewing inside. Your mind is this incredible powerhouse, the control center for your entire experience. And the obstacles we face, the things that block abundance, they're internal. They are these outdated inner programs or paradigms. These are the deeply ingrained beliefs we inherit, like money doesn't grow on trees. They run the show without our even knowing it, and they act as a kind of glass ceiling on our potential. The key to changing all of this is attitude, which the material calls the magic word. It's our thoughts, feelings, and actions all rolled into one. And change happens when we gently redirect our focus, when we use visualization to impress what we want onto the emotional mind.
And we should probably clarify what that is.
Right. The emotional mind is the subconscious. It's the part of us that, crucially, cannot tell the difference between a real, lived experience and one that is vividly and emotionally imagined. So by feeding it images of success, we are literally reprogramming that control center to attract the matching external results.
Okay. I come at this from a very different way. I don't deny the power of thought, not at all. But reducing really complex setbacks, financial, career, you name it, solely to an inner focus, well, it risks the kind of profound injustice. It puts all the blame on the individual, and it overlooks the genuine strength of external obstacles. The weight of reality can be overwhelming. The text itself says people are not whining without reason when life throws curveballs that hurt. So, think about someone staring at an empty bank account because of a huge medical bill. Is their despair the cause of the empty account, or is it a perfectly natural human response to a harsh reality? I would argue it's the latter.
Okay.
And honestly, I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the reason welfare families often stay that way across generations is solely because of a psychological paradigm. That kind of intergenerational scarcity it's far more complex. It involves policy, access to education, social networks, real material barriers. This idea of just tapping into universal energy to fix it, while it sounds compelling, might actually distract from the hard, systematic work needed to change the economic structures that distribute opportunity so unevenly.
All right, let's get into that. Let's talk about the direction of that mirror you mentioned, cause versus effect. I would argue that when you're stuck in a negative spiral, you're worrying about bills, you're feeling that fear, the outside world absolutely echoes that. More unexpected expenses pop up, more setbacks. It just confirms that the internal state sets a frequency and the universe pulls in more of the same. The causality flows from the inside out.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame the start of it all differently. I agree that a negative focus can blind you to solutions, of course. But the initial trigger for that spiral often comes from the objective now, the harsh external circumstances that already exist. We're told that letting the current situation dictate how you feel is giving away power. But don't we have to admit that the current situation itself has a powerful, independent gravitational pull?
Go on.
Okay, so imagine two people. Both lose their jobs on the same day. One panics, their internal focus shifts to fear. The other is incredibly disciplined, stays hopeful.
Now, if they're both in a town with no job openings, the hopeful one might feel better, sure, but the external reality, the lack of available income, is the fundamental problem for both of them. The external situation isn't just a passive reflection, it's an active force.
I see why you think that. And I'll concede, the initial curveball, the unexpected expense, that is often external. But the real power resides in the choice you make right after. That external event is just a test. Even when staring at that empty bank account, you can choose differently. You can use your imagination, that magic wand, to picture the life you actually want. The whole point is that this inner work precedes and enables the external solution. The problem is that most of us don't think. We just let the outside world dictate our thoughts.
But the psychological toll of that is immense. It's easy to say choose hope when your fridge is full. When your resources are gone, your mind it's bombarded by survival fear, not creative potential. The source material even hints at how hard this is. If it were just a simple choice, surely those generational cycles of poverty you mentioned wouldn't be so persistent, right? The very effort it takes to stay positive in a negative environment suggests that environment is way more than just a passive echo.
And that effort is precisely the work. That is the definition of transformation. It's about using our higher faculties, our will, our perception, to override those automatic limiting programs. That is where our power comes from. If the external reality held all the control, then choice would be meaningless, and no one would ever rise above their circumstances. But people do. And that fact alone demonstrates that the internal mechanism is ultimately sovereign.
Okay, let's dig into those paradigms then. You said yourself they're deeply rooted, maybe even genetic, absorbed from our parents. If these programs are so entrenched that brilliant people fail because paradigms rule, leading to that frustrating superior knowledge, inferior results outcome, doesn't that suggest that a mental shift alone is often not enough when you're up against real systemic disadvantages?
Take that child growing up in generational scarcity. Without the right network, without access to capital, they're facing a material barrier. How does visualizing wealth overcome a lack of physical collateral or inherited debt? It seems to me the internal change has to be met with, or maybe even follow, a real change in their access to opportunity. That is a difficult point to overcome, and we have to look at this as a multifaceted problem. But the internal shift isn't just about visualizing a pile of money. It's about fundamentally changing your perception and your behavior toward opportunity. Yes, these paradigms are entrenched, but they are absolutely breakable. The transformation happens by using focused repetition to impress new desires onto that emotional mind. That process lets you see solutions that are literally invisible to a mind that's programmed for scarcity. You shift from, "I can't afford this," to, "How can I create the income for this?" That's what opens new pathways.
But how?
Not by magic, not by money appearing from thin air, but by spotting new niches, attracting investors because you act with confidence, or creating solutions that don't rely on competing for the same scarce resources. The paradigm shift lets you look beyond the known boundaries.
But what about the insurance team example? The one that boosted sales by millions. That seems to demonstrate the power of focused effort, getting up earlier, using time better. Those are skills. That's discipline. That's action. I agree changing your paradigm can make you a better competitor, but does the core claim that everything already exists and you just pull it closer with your focus really account for a world with finite resources? You know, if a community lacks basic infrastructure, no amount of positive vibration is going to build a hospital.
And the material makes it clear that you need both. The internal shift precedes the effective action. The person programmed for scarcity will always find a reason, a belief, to sabotage their own external action, no matter what the opportunity is. That's why brilliant people fail. Their internal programming dictates inferior actions or stops them from persisting. So the internal program isn't just about attitude. It dictates your risk tolerance, your ability to negotiate, everything. Once that's aligned, you're equipped to not just compete within the old structure, but to change your relationship with it entirely.
Which brings us back to vigilance. You said we have to guard your mind.
We have to constantly say no thanks to junk thoughts from the news, from social media.
Yes, exactly. And that need for defense confirms that the chooser, the inner mind, is in ultimate control as long as it exercises its power.
But see, that's where I have a problem. If the inner world were truly the singular control center, why would we need such aggressive defense? Why would these outside forces have so much independent power that they can constantly threaten to overpower our inner resolve? To me, the need to constantly reject external negativity suggests the external world is not a passive echo at all. It's an actively invasive reality that requires constant energy just to maintain a baseline positive state. The control center is only in charge if it's spending all its time fighting off an invasion.
Well, that vigilance is just the discipline exercise of the thinking and choosing part of the mind, our will. That choice is where sovereignty is. The outside forces are always there, sure, but they only become a problem when we fail to use our perception to filter them. It's about controlling the dial of your frequency, making sure you're an energy being vibrating on a high one. And that's a practical discipline. It means choosing your media, choosing your conversations. That sustained dedication is how you make the paradigm shift permanent and allow intuition, the spirit guiding you, to take over from the rational mind that only sees the current limitations.
But if I'm in a state of high vibration and the external economy collapses, my high frequency can't stop my investments from losing value. The environment imposes non-negotiable realities. It seems like this framework minimizes the very real, measurable risk that comes from independent external forces.
I don't think it minimizes risk. I think it dictates how the self responds to risk. The person with a paradigm of abundance sees a market collapse as an opportunity to buy, to pivot. The person ruled by scarcity sees only total loss. That's the difference. One is determined by external events, and the other directs their response to them. The control is always internal. The effort is just the discipline needed to maintain it. So, to summarize my position, the transformation to abundance is a journey that starts and really ends within the individual's consciousness. Yes, the path requires discipline and the persistent use of our higher faculties, but that inherent power to choose our response is constant. By actively addressing those limiting inner programs through focus, repetition, visualization, you can confidently align yourself with and attract the abundance you want.
And I'd maintain that the interaction here requires a broader view. While the power of disciplined thought is, well, it's undeniably a necessary condition for success, we also have to recognize that the material itself points to these powerful, entrenched external circumstances, generational patterns, systemic barriers, invasive outside influences. These are things that may require real material engagement and policy shifts, not just a purely mental one, to truly overcome.
So, the discussion really illuminates that critical dynamic. The path to prosperity involves managing that internal world, the control center, the seedbed of thought, while at the same time navigating and adapting to the very real challenges of the external environment.
External constraints. And there is without a doubt much more to explore in how those two worlds interact to shape our destiny.